Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're going to take a look today at one of the biggest comics of the 90s, really. Maybe one of the more influential ones as well. We're taking a look at Neil Gaiman's, yes, I know that's not how you pronounce his name, I don't care. Neil Gaiman's Sandman #1. But just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, go subscribe on my Patreon. Links are in the description, gives you early access to everything I do, helps out the channel, helps to buy new comics. And before we get started on the issue, I just want to tell you about a Kickstarter being run by my buddy Eric Diorio, who's writing a comic called Reign in Ruins, a historical fiction comic set in the 13th century at the time of the Crusades. This isn't the first time Eric's written about historical fiction. He also produced the comic Souls for Sale. Alliterative titles are a favorite of his, I get the feeling. He's joined on this comic by Von Randall, who's gotten some work on King Spawn, as well as Batman and Transformers, and is currently working on the Keanu Reeves joint Berserker. And initiating promo clip now. And welcome back. Yeah, harsh transition back to reality, isn't it? So yeah, that's what you can accomplish when you hire actual professionals to help you out with stuff. So yeah, go back my buddy's comic book on Kickstarter, Reign in Ruins. Links are in the description. It's a cool looking book. So yeah, now back to this unprofessional bullshit channel. So Neil Gaiman in 1988 wasn't really anybody as far as the comics world was concerned. He's a guy who got into writing by doing things like interviews, book reviews, the odd biography, and got into comics through Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, and actually struck up a friendship with Alan Moore, and that was how he got into writing comics. Alan Moore apparently taught him how to write comics. So from there, he did what, all British comic writers do. He went and worked for 2000 AD, also continued Alan Moore's work on Miracle Man, and put out a limited series with his buddy Dave McKean called Cages. And all of that was enough to catch the attention of DC. They were rather impressed with his work and offered him a job, first rebooting the character Black Orchid, with Dave McKean doing the art. And then accounts seem a little bit mixed, where I'm not sure if DC offered him a reboot on Sandman or if he presented it as a pitch. The pitch sounds a bit more likely. So assuming that's the case, he offered to do an update on the old DC character of the Sandman with, Wesley Dodds at that time. And he'd incorporate some of the other Dreamtime stuff that DC had put out. They put out a lot of weird shit in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And Karen Berger came back and greenlit his pitch, just so long as it wasn't Wesley Dodds he was doing. It was a whole new character, just also named Sandman. So this is what he came up with. From all accounts, he got this original image of a young, pale, skinny man with dark hair and probably a British accent, maybe a little bit in love with the sound of his own voice, trapped in a bubble, and that's the image that he went with, and that we're going to see that image in this issue. So Neil Gaiman had his concept. From all accounts, he was assigned Sam Keith, which sounds weird because from what I understand, editors at DC did not like Sam Keith's artwork very much. Almost as much as Sam Keith himself didn't like his artwork. The most common thing I've heard about Sam Keith is that he absolutely hates his artwork. Like, you won't find a harsher critic of Sam Keith's artwork than Sam Keith. Which on the one hand meant he was always trying to one-up himself, which is probably good. On the other, I'm like, man, that sounds depressing. And I will be upfront and say that I'm not 100% convinced that all of the artwork in Sandman #1 works. I don't think it was a particularly good match for Sam Keith and the project. There's going to be some good stuff. There's going to be some stuff I don't think looks quite right. But anyway, we can get into that. We can start with the cover on this. This is a Dave McKean cover with his version of the Sandman character. Is the pencil lead retracted? It is too. Good. It's okay. This is a facsimile edition, so we don't have to worry too much about me damaging it. But very cool cover. Very different, I think, from most things that were going out at the time, as Dave McKean images tend to be, really. And Dave McKean would go on to do, I believe, every cover for the Sandman series, up to issue 75, which is pretty special. I mean, that gives this comic its own unique look, because like nobody's replicating Dave McKean. All right, so we're going to start out in Witchcross, England in 1916, where a man in a carriage pulls up to a big old estate and asks to speak to another man named Roderick Burgess. So we're going to get our first look at Sam Keith's art in this book, and there's nothing particularly outstanding one way or the other, really. Like, it's all fine drawings, a whole lot of panels, kind of an interesting page design. Like this choice here, particularly, for the standalone panel that bleeds into everything else, essentially, that has no dialogue in it. I'm reasonably certain that this would not have been done Marvel method. I mean, for one thing, it's DC, and I think most DC writers didn't really do that, where you just give the writer the plot and say, go, I'll fill in the words later. So I imagine that was requested, although this being the first issue, I wonder if maybe there was just a little bit of miscommunication. Reshoot alert, thought about it, and it occurred to me that it may actually be that it's trying to indicate just how long this person is sitting on the porch waiting. Without a panel border and without any kind of sound effects, without anything really indicating length of time, because that's what leaving an open panel border does, is it just kind of, it seems like timeless, it's endless. It may have been just like an interminable moment for this character sitting on the porch, kind of like he's hesitant, he's intimidated, he doesn't want to be put in this position, and the open panel border is kind of reflecting that. It's assuming that's what he's going for. It's an interesting choice if that's what it is. All right, so we're welcomed into Roderick Burgess's estate. Burgess is a mystic along the lines of Aleister Crowley, and Crowley is actually mentioned in here once or twice. So the person who is pulled up to Crowley's estate is a man named Dr. Hathaway. Dr. Hathaway runs the British Royal Museum and has in his possession a book that he is giving to the man they're just going to call the Magus, at least for the beginning of the book, in exchange for his son to be brought back. This is 1916, of course. World War I is ongoing, and Dr. Hathaway's son has just died at the front line. So that was enough to push him over the edge and decide he needed to do something about it. He goes to the local wizard and goes, here's the thing you asked for, bring my son back. And we're already going to get some pretty awesome page designs. If you remember from the Max, when it comes to page designs, Sam Keith don't give a fuck. He's going to do whatever he wants. Which feels like such an odd dichotomy for a guy who doesn't like his own work to just be incredibly bold when it comes to design elements. It's very strange to me. It might be because of his influences. I mean, he's very heavily influenced by Bernie Wrightson, and you can see that right here. And that's going to be evident throughout the issue in parts here and there. I think Arthur Suydam's early work was also a big influence. So, I mean, comparing himself constantly to guys who were great and always deciding, yes, compared to that, my stuff is shit. Well, like, sure, man, but like, so are the rest of us. Like, ease up a little bit. But yeah, wild page designs. Whole lot of detail in the background here. Not big on the figure work here. But a lot of the problems I have with the art in this issue, if, I do have problems here and there, comes down to the inking, I think. I don't think Mike Dringenberg, who's the inker, matches up very well with Sam Keith. I'm most familiar with Sam Keith from the Max, like the early issues of the Max, and from his run on Marvel Comics Presents when he was doing the Wolverine story. The one with him and Cyber, which is just incredible. So I'm aware that the best version of a Sam Keith page isn't just penciled by Sam Keith, it's also inked by him. And then you're going to get something that looks absolutely incredible. I imagine that wasn't going to happen here for time reasons. That was a problem with Sam over on Marvel, doing Marvel Comics Presents, where he just got stuck doing covers because that was all he could get out in time. So you got to work with what you got. And unfortunately, I think in this case, you're getting an inker whose style does not complement his penciler, unfortunately. From there, we're just going to get introduced to some supporting characters who are going to recur during this issue. This is just laying the groundwork stuff. This is the state they're all in. At the beginning of the issue, we get Ellie Marston from Toronto, Canada. Ontario got lost in there somewhere. That's okay. We get Daniel Bustamante from Kingston, Jamaica. We get Stefan Wasserman from Verdun, France. And Unity Kincaid from London, England. They're all very young people. Like, for instance, Stefan Wasserman here is 13. He lied to get into the front line. And they're all in situations right now that are at least related to sleep. And again, kind of a cool page design here. These are the gates to Roderick Burgess's estate. Didn't need to get that fancy, but it's Sam. That's what he's going to do. So night falls and Roderick prepares for a rite. He is the Grand Magus for a cult, basically, and he has plans to capture and bind Death, with the idea that, I guess, from at that point, he'll be able to choose who dies, but you get the impression that wouldn't be the case. He'd just basically doom the species. So he's going to bring his son Alex along with him, who he isn't particularly close to, but, he's his heir, and he's going to raise him in the ways of the Magi. I guess that is plural of Magus, isn't it? And he's super stoked because after tonight, he will be the envy of all the other wizards. They will be jealous of his wizarding prowess. And again, neat page design here, like all the panels, the border, everything. If you want ideas for how to come up with like creative panels and pages, at this point, you just go and check out a Sam Keith book of some kind. So Roderick and Alex go down to the basement to start the ritual. And I think the most notable thing here is the ritual itself, the actual incantation. I feel like we wouldn't have seen a lot of this in 1989. So the way it goes is I give you a coin I made from a stone. I give you a song I stole from the dirt. I give you a knife from under the hills and a stick that I stuck through a dead man's eye. And, it's just more kind of idiosyncratic kind of stuff. I feel like up until Neil Gaiman, you probably would have expected more Eye of Newt. After Sandman, I get the impression that this sort of thing became more common. I think it was pretty influential in terms of just coming up with those idiosyncrasies, like those little details that nobody else has became a much bigger focus, I think, whether they made sense or not. And the art here, it's fine, although I think that we're starting to see some of the strains here of Mike Dringenberg inking over Sam Keith. It doesn't really quite match. Like just the scratchiness of stuff like this, the shadows on Roderick here, and the cross-hatching, it's too sloppy. Like Sam Keith stuff can look sloppy if you're not looking too closely, but when you go up close, it's often very exact. Like I think he knows exactly what he's trying to do. And it feels like it's going a bit too much for speed, or just trying to get a certain effect that doesn't really mesh with his style. So the ritual gets closer to completion. Lots of skinny and kind of smallish panels keeping the pace fast to kind of build the tension. And eventually a being does teleport in. Nice, interesting smudging effect. I think it works well here as Morpheus comes into being on the physical plane. I believe this is a Mike Dringenberg thing where he's smudging. This is like a dry brush or maybe a sponge in ink, that sort of thing. I remember there's the one script that got collected in with the trade paperbacks for Calliope, I think, where Kelly Jones was doing the art. And in the script, I believe Neil Gaiman suggested that for Morpheus teleporting, Kelly Jones might want to use that smudging effect, and Kelly Jones is just like, nah, cross-hatching, better. Which I appreciate. That's kind of my opinion too. And then we've got Morpheus just lying here. We don't know exactly that he's Morpheus at this time, in 1989. This could very well be Death, because that's all we've been told so far. But cool splash of Morpheus just sprawled out inside of the circle. And that circle is where he's going to stay for quite some time. I always like the way Sam Keith does clothing. It's always very interesting. It seems very considered. It's not exactly realistic, but it feels like he has a definite texture quality that he goes for, that he's able to achieve most of the time. And U2 is the band that made music matter again, huh? That's good to know. I'm sure Bono thinks so. So the cultists look at the form that they've summoned. They're like, holy shit, it worked. And Roderick's like, no, it didn't. This isn't him. But in the meantime, we might as well scoop up everything he's got. So they take his ruby, they take his helmet, and they take his pouch. And these are items that are going to become important over the next few issues. More just kind of casually inventive page designs with just whatever he's doing with the curved panels here and the circular stuff. I guess because of the circle that Morpheus is trapped in, right? He's kind of looking out, and you get a fishbowl effect. And Sam Keith doesn't do bad with the fishbowl effect. He'll use it a fair bit over the course of this issue. So from there, we move to our young people that we saw earlier. So Ellie and Daniel and Stefan and Unity. So Ellie, for starters here, seems to start suffering from essentially narcolepsy, where she keeps falling asleep during the day. So her dad brings her up to bed, she falls asleep, and she never wakes up. Daniel Bustamante usually dreams of finding a castle in the clouds, and he just has adventures there. Only in his most recent one, he goes back to the castle and it disappears out from under him because there's nobody running these dreams anymore, and he wakes up screaming. Stefan has a weird form of PTSD, although they wouldn't have identified it as such at the time, where he won't sleep. He can't. And he goes for days without sleep, and his life basically becomes a living nightmare. And then we've got Unity here, another one who just can't stay awake for very long. She starts sleeping for longer and longer, turning into days. And this looks more like this is pure Sam Keith up here, by the looks of it. This looks more like Mike Dringenberg. This is the kind of stuff we saw in like the Collector's storyline with the Corinthian and everything. All right, so more stuff from Morpheus's point of view with that fishbowl effect. As Roderick visits him and tells him that he's completely trapped, he can't go anywhere because the glass dome he's encased in is keeping his physical form trapped, of course, but also the circle around it is keeping his incorporeal form from leaving as well. So he won't be leaving anytime soon, but maybe they can arrange something if he can accede to a few of Roderick's demands. And then he takes off again. And, he's very much the powerful wizard in this case, which will be a contrast to how things are later on. We get some other developments with that the curator who was running the museum, who got him the book at the beginning, who Roderick has been blackmailing ever since. And he decides he's going to end his life, but before he does, he writes a suicide note explaining everything that has happened, everything that he's done wrong, as well as everything that's been done wrong to him by Roderick. And then, stabs himself. His confession note is lying out, but it does spontaneously combust because of Roderick's spells. So everyone's just wondering about why this curator went and killed himself for no reason. We keep flipping back. Just everything's going wrong with sleep and dreams in general. We cut back to Stefan Wasserman, who has topped himself eventually. And back to Roderick's estate. This is 1926 now. This is 10 years later. And his captive still hasn't even spoken to him. He goes down there every night, makes his offer, like eternal life, wealth, all that stuff. And his captive just, stares him down until he leaves again. And Alex here, Roderick's son, fair bit older now, is able to at least tell him that he thinks he's identified who the captive is, figures it was one of the Endless, and eventually decides that it must have been Dream. And he's like, yeah, no, I figured that too, but I'm glad you found out. So now we know who the captive is and who our eventual main character is. Cut from there, and Roderick's second in command, Ruthven Sykes, there's like a schism in the order. And Sykes takes off with a bunch of Roderick Burgess's stuff, including everything that he got from Dream. So the helm, the ruby, and the pouch. And one of the first things he does is he trades the helmet with a demon so that he can have protection against Roderick, like magical protection. And it works. Roderick keeps trying to cast spells so that Sykes will just drop dead, and nothing happens because he's got this protective amulet that he got from a demon somewhere. But eventually, Roderick's opportunity presents itself because there's always going to be there's a schism all the time. So in this case, it's Sykes' girlfriend, most likely, I think, walks out on Sykes, takes everything with her, including the amulet he got from the demon, leaving him without protection, giving Roderick the opportunity to strike, which he does, exploding him grotesquely. Very nice stuff, great panel, gross as shit. And it's maybe the only particularly good panel on this spread, unfortunately. This is where it feels like the inking really gets sloppy. Stuff like this doesn't really cut it. Some stuff, is like the penciling's strong enough that it still comes through, like the shot here of him holding up the helmet. But like this shot here of Sykes and his girlfriend, it doesn't look particularly great. This all looks really sloppy with all just sorts of really random hatching going on all over the place. Like, there's no way Sam Keith would have gone for that. And this shot here is reminiscent of a shot that we would have seen recently, actually, because we went through Bernie Wrightson, Master of the Macabre #1, which featured the Black Cat. That one there. That's a little memorable. I'm thinking it was probably memorable for Sam Keith, too, and knowing that he's a Bernie Wrightson fan. But yeah, good exploding face panel, at least. We check in again with our 3 kids now. Stefan's dead. Ellie has woken up twice in the last decade. Still mentally thinks she's like 6. Daniel eventually succumbed to the sleeping sickness, but late. So apparently he has a wife and child that are missing him while he's sleeping away. And Unity here basically hasn't woken up the entire time. And they say here that she was assaulted and the baby was taken away. The whole thing was hushed up. But that's going to get brought up again in a later storyline. We also get Wesley Dodds, the original Sandman, who has been having bad dreams, but ever since he started going out at night, fighting criminals in a weird getup, he finds that he doesn't have bad dreams anymore. So that's the only shout out that there's going to be to Wesley Dodds until I believe The Wake. So then we cut back to Roderick. This is 1947 now. This is 30 years later. Roderick's an old man. He's near death, and he's just an asshole all the time. He goes down one last time to yell at his captive, just kind of laments the fact that he's gotten old and he doesn't feel he needed to, he didn't deserve to, something like that. He was such a great wizard that he could have made himself not die if only the stupid prisoner hadn't fucked everything up for him. Now we get our first narration from Morpheus saying, watching my captor grow old and die, no satisfaction, still here. Good little heads, good little Sam Keith heads. That's fun stuff. Check back in with the kids. They all would just basically sleep all the time. This is 1955, 40 years later. Not a great looking page. It looks like there's a lot of Dringenberg in here. And I don't mind Dringenberg stuff when he's doing issues later on, like 24 Hours. I think he does Sound of Her Wings too. I like everything in those, but it feels like working off of Sam Keith's pencils or maybe even breakdowns. He can't put it together right now. So back to the Burgess estate. Alex is in charge now. He's running the cult, although he's not quite as manic about it as his dad was. He does have his own right-hand man, which is Paul, his boyfriend, so that's nice. Again, not digging how these heads are turning out. It's just not great-looking stuff. And he goes down and he talks to the prisoner. Tells him, the offer that my dad made to you is still open. Power, immortality, a promise that you won't seek revenge. Any chance you're interested in that now after 30 years? And he just says no. Great-looking page design. With some really nice-looking panels in here as well. There isn't really anything bad on this page. And the stuff that's good is pretty damn good. I even like all the reflective stuff going on in the bubble here. It's very swoopy reflections. A lot of black in there. It looks great. Okay, 1968, 50 years later. Alex is the head of a weird cult. And he introduces kids to drugs and weird sex rights and the sort of stuff weirdo cult guys would introduce kids to in the 60s. Quick check back in with our kids, who are just kind of representative of anybody who caught the sleeping sickness in 1916. So Ellie and Unity still just sleep. Daniel tends to wander around the streets in a trance. They just call him a zombie. And just a great little Sam Keith looking creature here. This little toad goblin looking thing. Very memorable looking. And, the rest of the page here is fine. It's really the little toad goblin thing that stands out. 1970, Alex muses on his father, muses on his captor, cuts up his father's painting. Nothing much going on in the page itself. Some decent designs and some nice angles at least. And then we get over the years as Alex becomes the next wizened old magus. 1972, 1978, 1982. So we're talking 65 years from when he was first captured. And he keeps trying to talk to his prisoner and kind of cajole him. And, we're cool, man. Just give me the stuff I want and we'll let you out. It's all good. And we finally get to 1988. Alex is a bitter old man. He's gotten no further than his dad ever did. And at least his dad was able to capture Dream in the first place. And at this point, he just kind of seems to come down to the basement to look at his captive and mutter complaints. He's getting close to death. He knows it. He knows he's not going to win. He'll never convince the prisoner to change his mind. So he's just going to be bitter about it. So he's old enough now that he's constantly being carried around in a wheelchair. And his boyfriend/assistant, Paul, who has never believed in magic, really, even though there's a naked dude in the basement who hasn't eaten, slept, or aged in 30 years, isn't paying enough attention when he wheels Alex out of the basement one day. And the wheelchair swipes at the circle and mars it. So that breaks the enchantment keeping Dream's incorporeal form inside the box. Which doesn't completely free him, but it does mean that he can have influence outside of the glass sphere now. And one of the guards starts to get drowsy. He's talking to a guy, and the guy he's a total bore to talk to, and starts to nod off, which is a big no-no in the basement. It's been strictly prohibited before now, but you get the feeling that this has been going on so long that everyone's getting a little lax now. And he dreams about lying on the beach, getting some sun, enjoying the surf. Meanwhile, I guess Dream's incorporeal form is able to touch the Dream because it's, it's right in his proximity, and is able to scoop up some of the sand. Nice looking hand here. Like, these look like hand studies, most likely. Makes me wonder if Sam Keith's left-handed. I get the feeling he might be. The actual drawings themselves, for the most part, they don't look great. There's more of that kind of sloppy hatching going on, like in the cheeks here. Everything here, like that, this hatching here looks fucking awful. And, honestly, looks kind of unskilled, which feels like it might be uncharitable, but, you're a professional inker, man. I can ink better than this. Anyway, the guy has woken up because the captive has collapsed. And this is the first time he's done, anything in 70 years. They call a bunch of the other guards in to come, and they got to try and figure out something to do. Nobody's sure exactly what. The only person who was here the last time there was no glass bubble is Alex. All anybody knows about this guy is that he doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, and doesn't age. So they decide, okay, well, we're going to have to check on him. They go and open the box. Everybody starts to come in. And it's not I don't think it's Dream can overpower them, physically. But he still has the sand that he scooped out from the Dream, which he's able to blow and kind of knock everybody unconscious, Sandman Dream powder stuff. A lot of tiny panels, a lot of moment-to-moment transitions. I feel like it's trying to go for an effect where things are getting drawn out, but I feel like because of how small all the panels are, it's also compressing it at the same time. It feels like it's not working exactly the way it should in that case. I don't know, that's probably on me, though, for maybe misinterpreting things. Anyway, Dream is now free. He's able to teleport himself away from here and get back to the dreaming. And as far as they're all concerned, just flat out disappears. Awesome page. Everything. The pose here is pretty spectacular. He's stretched way out. I like the portal with all the choices for how he drew the curves. It's pretty creative, and it's just not the first thing you'd think to draw when you're thinking of a portal, I feel like. Just a little bit of a twist. And so, in the dreaming, Morpheus kind of reacquaints himself with his old home. The first thing he needs is food, so he's going to reach out to basically the nearest passing dream he can that might have any food in it. And it's a thing with a dude who's going to a party, only didn't realize it wasn't a costume party. He came as a clown, and Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, and John Wayne are all laughing at him now. Even Colonel Sanders here looks like he's having a great time. But since it is a party, they have food. That's good enough for Morpheus, who just kind of crashes the buffet, scoops up everything he can. We've got what look like photocopies here of all the celebrities and the clown. I'm not sure where he got the clown from. But it feels like photocopies were an early solution for Sandman. I feel like Mike Dringenberg used them a fair bit too. Morpheus fashions himself some clothes, so now he's essentially whole. He doesn't have his tools that were originally taken from him when he was first captured. So the helm, the ruby, the pouch of sand. So he's going to go back to Alexander Burgess and get that, and maybe get a little bit of payback. And again, I hate this inking now. I never had a problem with Mike Dringenberg before, but now that I'm taking a close look at the way he's hatching, it's pissing me off. Anytime it looks like he's got to hatch anything, pretty much, it looks like he took a Bic and scribbled. Sandman would eventually get to look a lot better, to the point where it was the book that essentially founded Vertigo, like this and Hellblazer. As far as I know, anyway. I'm not any kind of, DC buff. But eventually it would become, this standard of quality. At the beginning here, it feels like it was just I don't know, we got this weird book, let's find a guy. And because Morpheus has now taken his place back in the dreaming, everything is theoretically as it should be. Around the world, everybody who previously suffered from the sleepy sickness starts to wake up. So Ellie in, a retirement home, looking a little young here, considering that she first fell asleep 70 years ago. All these guys look a little young, really. But she starts to wake up, and of course, she's still mentally 6 years old. Daniel, his eyes finally clear, he's finally aware. And Unity, theoretically 85-year-old Unity, looking like she's maybe 46 and had a rough night. Wonders about the baby that she dreams that she had. And yeah, none of this stuff looks particularly great. Part of the problem for me is that none of it looks like Sam Keith. I do wonder how fast he had to go and how much detail he was able to put in the pencils. Some pages, pages like this, I get the feeling he spent a bit more time on, which maybe means something like this, he had to scramble a bit more on. But we're getting close to the ending of the book now. We're going to end things with Alex Burgess, who, is an old man asleep in his bed, and he's dreaming about walking through a castle, and he's basically walking through his life, seeing like his younger self reflected in mirrors. Seeing a cat, naturally he has to follow it, and as he follows it, he becomes like the 10-year-old boy he was when they first captured Dream. Again, a lot of small panels. Feels like more to get more actions in than to speed things up, but it does have the tendency to just kind of make your eyes skate over it too. So, Alex follows the cat into sort of a central chamber. Cat sits on the throne. Cat turns into Morpheus. Alex tries to apologize and say, look, it's not my fault. And Morpheus is just like, no. Don't insult me with that shit. We're not there yet. Tell me what happened to my stuff, and then we'll get back to that. So Alex tells him that was in the stuff that Sykes grabbed when he split from the Order. He has ideas about where they might be, and that's going to be what happens over the next few issues, is that Morpheus is going to have to try and reclaim his tools. It's a pretty basic setup for, the first few issues of your new comic. Neil Gaiman said this himself. But I mean, it's a tried and true thing that pretty much always works. And, I'm pretty sure people dug it. It's a nice sequence. It's fun. People like seeing their heroes go through trials, especially when they're first getting to know them. And it ends with Dream kind of throwing Alex's crimes back in his face. Like, okay, maybe you weren't the one who originally imprisoned me, but after your dad died, you had a chance to let me walk, and you didn't, and you kept me imprisoned for another 30 years. So with that in mind, kind of a nothing page, I got a present for you. And we're going to get back to the inventive stuff. Again, I think the stuff that Sam Keith probably spent a little more time on. So the gift that Sandman has given to Alex Burgess is eternal waking. So he wakes up from his dream, sees Paul next to him, goes, oh my God, I had a horrible nightmare. And Alex gets some real creepy lighting on him, and his face starts to melt. And then he wakes up, and he goes, oh my God, I had a horrible nightmare. And the nurse who's attending him, her head essentially falls off and goes, yeah, get used to it, buddy. These pages are much better than what we've seen, I think, for most of the end of the issue here. A lot more creative, just a lot of creepy shit going on. Like this stuff here, that'll sit with you for a while. Just the look on his face as he slowly melts when he's all uplit. And that's a lot more cartoony and kind of goofy, but still kind of horrifying. And this one here with the nurse's head falling off, it feels like a bit of a goofy premise. But with the overall feeling, I think it's still, I'm willing to let it slide. Some of the inking here, again, not great. Not a fan. This shot here looks way, way more like Mike Dringenberg if he has a little bit of time. And in real life, of course, Alex Burgess didn't wake up again. Not at this time anyway. He just keeps having dreams where he wakes up and horrible shit happens and he wakes up. And Morpheus is pleased, and that's where we end things. Weird choice here at the end to cover up the art with like a color hold of another drawing. I don't know whose idea that was. It just kind of makes the whole thing incomprehensible. But yeah, that's the end of the issue. It's a pretty solid issue. Good story. It's a shame about the art, I think, that I think it could have been done better if Sam Keith had had time to ink himself, but that was never going to happen on a monthly title. Still, it does seem like they got somebody who was geared more for speed than for making it look good. So that's a bit of a shame, but Sam Keith stuck around for, I want to say 5 issues, maybe 6. Yeah, 5. And then you get stuff like 24 Hours, Sound of Her Wings, where Death is first introduced. And then you move on to The Doll's House, and it feels like at that point, that's where the series starts to pick up steam. You go through the issues that were collected in the Dream Country trade, with Dream of a Thousand Cats and Midsummer Night's Eve, that kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure Dream of a Thousand Cats wins an Eisner. And then you get into Season of Mists, and I feel like that's where it really establishes itself as one of DC's premier titles. And I mean, it's a great comic, It's a story that doesn't rely on physical punch-ups, although, the odd bit of violence happens here and there. Every once in a while, it gets back to its horror comic roots, because there's elements in this that are very much a horror story. It's a bit more gothic than people might have been used to in 1989, but that's fine for DC, and, it fits right in with their House of Mysteries, House of Secrets past. I could see doing a couple more single-issue Sandman stories in future. If you guys have any you want me to hit, let me know in the comments. But for now, anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe on my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon-exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions, and you can join the Blood Force Discord server. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.